data science knowledge. They don't have that. And so we'll discuss foundations of data analysis in the real world. We'll look at the research process where data analysis comes in the research process. We'll discuss the different types of data that are there, data structures, how we can measure them, how to understand them, how to identify the different types of data. Now, this is because without a proper understanding of data, you won't be able to do the right analysis. It's not uncommon to see poorly analyzed data simply because the analyst did not understand the data. So we don't want to be that. We'll be looking at this data from a professional perspective. We'll talk about data collection. While we are using SQL for data collection and many other tools like Kobo Collect, Google Sheets. We'll discuss the different data collection methods and which one you can use in what situation. Then we'll revisit the concept of population and sampling. I will discuss data preparation and cleaning. Now, most of what we are discussing here is theory, but this is just a foundation for the real work where we'll be able to use. Like we said, our classes are 90% practical, 10% theory. It's not like it's not a cliche, it's a reality. That's what we do. That's why we often give just a few classes for theoretical concepts. Then we'll talk about descriptive statistics, how to interpret them. We'll understand what's descriptive statistics and how relevant they are. A significant portion of data analysis is around descriptive statistics. And now, most decisions in the world of data are probabilistic. So we'll discuss probability, uncertainty, and risks. We'll discuss that. The essence is to give you a core understanding into how decisions are made in the world of data science. How decisions are made in the world of data science. That is the main ideology or philosophy. We'll go into inferential statistics, testing hypotheses, making generalization. How do you get to decide whether what you are seeing from your data can be applied to an entire population? We'll discuss that. Then we'll look at relationships. Before that, we'll look at differences. Why do we separate men and women when it comes to athletics, but do not do so when it comes to academic performance? There's no football that women and men compete in one game. That is not by chance. It's true statistics. That's why men are separated. So that's looking at differences, what they mean. And here we discuss it using tests like t-test, whether it's independent sample t-test, ANOVA, one sample t-test, paired sample t-test, or any of the tests, or chi-square and the rest. Our objective is to be able to compare things and choose which one is better, which one is higher, which one is lower, which one is good for us. That is very, very important. Those are skills that we need to have in order to make the right decisions. So we'll discuss that as we progress in our class. We'll look at relationships. How do we know when two things are related? What does that mean for us? Now, what is the difference between relationship an effect. There's a difference between an effect study. That two things are related doesn't necessarily mean that one is causing another. So we often say in statistics, relationship or correlation is not causation. So we'll look at that. That will give us some real knowledge. Now, we'll have a lot of other things to look at. Principally, that's what we'll be discussing as this particular course is concerned. It's more or less theoretical knowledge in data science, which handles statistics and probability principally. Now, this is giving us, this will take this alongside the basic programming concepts, which we'll see. That's why from the second, I think today's Monday, by Saturday, we'll go back to using database. On Sunday, we'll come with our laptop so that we'll also introduce concepts of programming. We'll be doing this thing alongside. So on Mondays, we'll be having more or less this theoretical discussion. On Saturdays, we'll be doing database, and on Sundays, we'll be able to take programming. I think that is how we'll go. Power BI, all of that. Now, our success depends on how willing and fast you guys can work. Yes, that's one thing. If you can work and you're ready to go fast, I think we can finish this and finish it on time, especially when the class is not much. And those who are there picking the concept very fast, we'll shorten the time. So that is a brief outline of what we'll see. Today, we're starting from the foundation, assuming that you've never done statistics. Now, the first thing before we talk about data science, we have to discuss what is data. What is data? Or before you talk about data analysis, you must start from data. Now, data is defined as raw information. Yes, I might define data as raw information. This is raw facts that you've collected, but you've not analyzed them. And that is a simple definition. Now, it might not make much meaning. What do we mean by raw facts? But the idea behind data is that we collect raw facts that have no specific meaning. If you go to the hospital, the nurses will require you to provide some information. Sometimes they call that vital signs. They will tell you, give us, maybe take your height, your gender, your age, your blood group, and things like that. I'm not a nurse, so I don't really know, but I know that that's what they do. Now, that information collected is data. The problem with that information collected is that it has little or no meaning in the world of data science until we analyze it. And so they've just collected data, but they are not analyzing it. Now, what happens is that you may go back and check the lady who came on Monday, what was the situation, this and that, but that is not analysis in itself. But you have collected data. You enter a supermarket and you pick up some products. You get to the counter and they basically say, give us your name, your phone number. They take your products and that information is stored. You give money They say, are you paying Momo or pay cash or you're paying via bank? You say, I'm paying cash, but I have part in Momo. They collect that information. That information is stored in a database. That's still raw data. Now, if we go by that understanding, it means on daily basis, please, when you have a question, you can just stop me and ask, eh? Yes, don't wait that maybe you have a question or a worry, just stop me and ask. I will try to provide an answer to that. Now, what happens is that on daily basis, we keep collecting information or data is produced. When you go online, for instance, I think that all of us have been online this morning. You read messages, you send messages, maybe it was voice notes, you watch some videos, watch some phone time, maybe do one or two things, call somebody, all of that. That is data that is generated. Now, the messages you are sending, the videos you are watching, the voice messages, somebody is reviewing them to understand your preferences, your interests, your behavioral patterns, and many other things around you. That work is done by a data scientist who pulls that data, the pool of data, maybe from Boya, from Cameroon, from Africa, from the rest of the world to analyze and determine customer behavior. So that is data that is collected. And that data is not useful until somebody goes look at it and identify what we say patterns, trends, and more others in order to make decisions. Now, the essence of data analysis is to do what? To help the organization make meaning. So data analysis primarily is to extract meaning from data. And so what is gotten from data is called information. When we analyze data, we have information. Called information. So what is a simple idea? As a data analyst, your essence or your reason or your work is to pull this data, whether it's a bank that you're working in, a microfinance, an NGO, a government agency, to pull the various or the different data types that are available based on the problem you want to solve, because data is not analyzed in space. Nobody just gets up and said to be analyzing your consumption pattern of or your online behavior if there is no interest or there's no problem. So there needs to be a problem that you're pulling the data to analyze and to give answers to it. So, in other words, it is very, very important for us to understand that as data scientists, we play a key role. Now, we are potential data scientists. We are not a data scientists. We play a key role in decision making and having the right skills, the right tools to help the organization is primordial. You don't want to mislead the company with wrong data, with wrong analysis. Now, in the data analysis process, there is something that you need to understand, which is there is about five-step process. About five-step process. If you make a mistake in any of these steps, the whole work you do will likely be wrong. Now, it brings us to that mindset that data analysis is not really about numbers. Data analysis is not about numbers. It is about understanding reality through what? Evidence. You are trying to understand reality. You are trying to understand what is happening using evidence. That is what data analysis brings to the table. Understanding reality through evidence. You are not speculating. You are not assuming. There is something that guides you for whatever decision you are taking. And that is why we're here, to be able to learn how to go through this process as data scientists. Now, every data set is presenting to you a real world scenario so that you should be able to understand. We have talked about the hospital. Now, the patient's data needs to be collected to analyze to treat the patient well. A lot of treatments are given based on guess. Now, it may shock you that in the hospital, doctors are still using the concept of probability. And they're using a concept of probability and to a significant extent guesswork. That's why you get to the hospital, they go and test for malaria. You test for malaria, they say no, go, they come back. They keep telling you, go and test this one, go and test this one, go and test this one. Why are they not getting to the right issue immediately? They're applying the concept of probability, consciously or not. And so we are living in a world where a lot of data is produced on daily basis. On daily basis, on almost there is, I don't know whether the amount of videos uploaded, just try to imagine the amount of videos uploaded on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Switch, or all the different social media platforms. That's just online. How many searches are going on? How many people are teaching online at this moment? How many people are discussing online? That's a huge amount of information. How many companies are recording transactions as we're discussing? If you go to Injefobi now, there are people there standing maybe queuing to pay for. So imagine the amount of transactions. But the problem is that until this data is analyzed, it benefits not the company much. The company will still be using guesswork. The doctor will still be using to an extent guesswork because he's using experience and guesswork and some principles that he has learned. But a doctor will be more efficient if he or she can use data in decision making. Imagine you are working with MTN as we discussed the other day. At one time, MTN wanted me to come and work with them. Right? You are the one in charge of Momo. Everybody is doing their transfers forward and back every second. Somebody is doing a credit, debit, this, and that. Money is transferred, send, receive, and the rest. You need to be on the top of the knob to ensure that the money is going to the right recipient. There are no fraudulent transactions. If there are fraudulent transactions, you should be able to predict them before they even happen. Maybe somebody used to send just 10,000, 5,000, 20,000, and just out of his son, the person is sending 500,000. It's a call for concern, even if you have that money. In a preventive system, they may block that amount of money and find out if you are the one. That's why you go to a bank. Sometimes you want to withdraw money with a cash. We are cut. And they prevent the transaction from going on and say contact administrator. Why do they say contact administrator? Because they want to verify that truly you are the one. We have a lot of e-commerce platforms. Alibaba, Jumia, Amazon, and the rest. The growth and success of Alibaba, Amazon, is thanks to the use of data. They have thousands of products listed and they're selling worldwide. They do a lot of, how do they push their adverts? They do. I think statistics shows that Amazon spends at least 20 billion francs, dollars every year on Google Ads. That's only because they analyze and they're able to get to the people who need these different products. So basically, what are we discussing? We are trying to help us understand the place of data in decision making. And the mindset of a data analyst is you question everything. You don't take everything as if it's a final no. You are being analytical. You are not assuming things. You want hard evidence. You are able to question things. Now, I was discussing with somebody, this is slightly a bit different, which is more politics. And we're discussing Trump's foreign policy, Trump's policies, whether Americans are better off or not. And we're discussing one thing we're discussing is about inflation. So my argument from a statistical perspective is that Trump has done far more better than the previous administration. But my counter part argument was that no, inflation is still high. But I say yes. In statistics, we don't say inflation is still high. We say inflation is high compared to. Anything can be considered high when you compare it to another thing, right? So before Trump, under Biden was about 9%. So Trump has brought it down to maybe 4%, but the people still wonder it should come down to the acceptable rate, which is 1.9 or 2% inflation rate. So a data scientist tries to question, if you say that sales increased by 20%, that is not enough. You are comparing the 20% to what period? Are you comparing it sales for today compared with yesterday, compared with last week, last month, last year? Wow. Because sales increased by 20% says very little. You may be jubilating that it has increased by 20%, but that is not. And have you accounted for other factors that are likely to influence your decision? So data scientists questions when they see statistics, don't see statistics and just take statistics at absolute value. You must try to understand context. Context is very, very important. You pay somebody 200,000 francs in Boya, the person may struggle. But if you give somebody that 200,000 francs in a village, maybe Libonge or whatever village or place like Kwakwa, per month, it might be very comfortable for the person. The person will pay a house maybe 3,000 or 5,000, buy food relatively cheap. There is banana, plantain everywhere and things like that. So you see that context matter because at the end of the day, statistics must be situated in a particular situation to give relevance. So you must understand first, you question, two, you have context, and three, you need to conclude whether it is a correlation or a causation that is taking place. Correlation means two things are related. Causation means one is resulting to whatever is happening on another. For instance, rainfall helps plants to grow. So rainfall basically causes the growth of plants. We can say that's causation. But if we have a situation where it doesn't necessarily mean that that would be an alternate situation. Let me take the case of ice cream sales and people drowning in a river. Now, generally, during the rainy season, there is less consumption of ice cream. And so but the reverse is true in the dry season. Now, if you discover by being an analyst and discover that so many people are drowning in the dry season and there is increased consumption of ice cream, can you in any way conclude that increased consumption of ice cream leads to drowning? No, that's a situation of a causation or correlation is not causation, which means that while we see increased consumption of ice cream, it is not responsible for people drowning. What happens is that during the dry season, places are hot, so people tend to go a lot to the river. You see people die because they fear that the river was down, they can swim, places are hot. So the both events, the increased consumption of ice cream and drowning, they are not related, they are related, but one is not causing the other. What is affecting the both situation is what? That there is dry season and places are hot. So it is the hotness of the period that's responsible for increased consumption of ice cream and drowning because so many people are going now to the river. That comes up. So you must always think like that. You must think from that dimension. That is the mindset. Now, another thing is to think in terms of variation. Variation is like change. You're not just saying that this is the value, but how much does it vary or how much does it change and why? The question of why. So, the first thing that we want to achieve with our current classes and with these concepts is to give you a mindset of how a data analyst professional thinks when he or she is approaching the work. And I just said, we'll look at the different stages of data analysis decision making, from problem understanding to problem understanding and formulation, to data collection, to data analysis, to data discussion and conclusion. If you make a mistake in any of these, if you go to define your problem and you define the problem wrongly, the data you collect might also be wrong. Even if you collect the right data, you may not be able to get the right results. So that's pretty very, very important. Now, there are different types of data analysis problems that you face as a data analyst or a data scientist along the way. And we can group them under 4 key headings. We have what we call the descriptive problems. We have the diagnostic, we have the predictive and the prescriptive. Regardless of which data you're trying to analyze, it tries to model this from whether you are trying to describe what is. Now, the descriptive data analysis basically tries to ask what happened or what is happening. Why do we have increase amount of rainfall in September? You're trying to describe. Now, with descriptive, we go with what we call mean, averages. What is the average rainfall? What is the median rainfall? What is the percentage increase? What is this, and that? Those are descriptive statistics as we'll see as we make progress. But the most important thing at this particular point is for you is to understand that descriptive statistics or descriptive analysis tries to answer the question, what is happening or what has happened? Diagnostics is much more than what has happened. Now, we're seeing this is happening at this particular, but because of something has happened, you want to go and diagnose the problem. You go into a company and you look at sales and discover that sales are dropping. It might be because there is something that's happening that is causing sales to be dropping. So you want to diagnose the source of the problem. Why are sales dropping? Why are students' performance reducing? Why do we have a lot of students failing the GCSE now, unlike before? Why are students refusing to go to school? Why has scamming increased? This and that. You want to diagnose and get the source using data. We have the predictive. Predictive now, because we can now understand what has happened and what is happening, we want to forecast the future. And that is the essence of data analysis in all. We want to forecast the future. We want to know which customers are more likely to buy so that we optimize our ads and more and so on and so forth. You want to be able to determine what will happen tomorrow because you know what has happened now. So you tell the company, by this time next year, the current value or you'll be making sales of 10 million. Currently, they're not at 10 million. Maybe they are 7 million or they are 5 million. And as a data analysis, you analyze and you see the growth rate, the trajectory, and you tell them that, okay, if we keep pace with what is happening now, by this same time next year, we'll be at 10 million. A professional data analyst may not give exact 10 million. Maybe it can be 9.5 or 11 point this. So there is a probability that you have to attach to it, which we call the significant level, the confidence level, which are things we'll discuss. You're trying to forecast the future. And that's where data analysis become useful, because the only reason why we're analyzing data is to make sure that we identify patterns. That's why you're analyzing the data. You want to identify patterns and make predictions on what will happen tomorrow. Out of that, data analysis is not that useful. You identify patterns and anomalies. If there is no reason for you, or if you're unable to identify patterns, the data might not be that very useful. So we see patterns. What happened yesterday is highly likely to happen today and highly likely to happen tomorrow. So we can plan. We can know to what extent, and we know the risks. That's what standard deviation and the rest try to capture. What is the risk? What is the potential deviation that we can experience from what is happening? They are prescriptive. Now, what actions do you recommend in order for us to achieve the expected outcome? So whenever you sit as a data analyst, you're trying to go through different types of analysis to bring us to the conclusion that we should expect this if we do this. So you are doing prescriptive analysis. And in the real world, data analysis starts from defining the problem. I've mentioned that already. You must define the problem. Now, if you define the problem wrongly, that's the beginning of your issues. You must define the problem and identify the variables of interest. We'll discuss what variables are. Is it descriptive variables? Is it dependent, independent variables, and the rest? We'll be able to understand that. We'll be able to understand that. So, basically, our desire is to, or our objective is to be able to define the problem according to how it is. And that's the first thing. That you're working as data analyst. When they bring you, you don't just fall on the data. No, you ask, what are we trying to achieve? They should give you the specific objectives. Why you should analyze the data. Why you should be digging through records. To what are we trying to solve? Is it a sales problem? Is it a performance problem? Is it an employee's problem? Is it, and so on and so forth, so that you know exactly what is the problem. Now, once you get the problem right, you can move on to the next two. If you understood the problem, then it now tells you or gives you an ideology to where you are going to get the data. You cannot get sales records data maybe from questionnaires. It might not be very realistic. So you need to go to a database that the company is using for sales on daily basis. If it's a supermarket, you go say, okay, go to the software, connect your Power BI or your SQL, and retrieve the data. You start looking at it. If it is about maybe consumer behavior preferences, you may want to issue a questionnaire. You may want to conduct interviews. You may want to do focus group discussion to test a product, a new product you're bringing to the market, to test whether customers will like it or not. But what guides you to arrive at that conclusion starts first from what? The problem you're trying to solve. Now, once you have identified the data and you collect it, the next thing is that Data hardly comes ready for use. This you'll see it, and will give you all the strategies, the steps, the things to take to consider when it comes to data cleaning. If you ask data scientists, they say that they spend 60 to 80% of their time trying to clean data. That tells you how important it is and how poorly clean data can be disastrous for the organization, for the project. So you have to clean data. What happens when there are missing values? Missing values where, for instance, you collect data about sales and you discover that every week there are no sales on Mondays. Maybe because Mondays goes down. How do you manage Monday to know the average daily sales? Should you just assume that, okay, you should not use Mondays? You should exclude Monday from the analysis. Or you discover that in trying to analyze, you end up discovering that in the Northwest and Southwest, they're working just 4 days. Tuesdays to Fridays or Saturdays in some cases. Or maybe they're working, yeah, Tuesday, that's 4 days, principally. But you want to be able to give the company a true picture of what is happening. Should you exclude the other days? You exclude Mondays, Sundays, and Saturdays to have your 4 days. The problem is that the company is not necessarily paying based on the number of days work. If they pay monthly, whether they work just 4 days or they work 6 days, it has a role to play. So as a data analyst, how do you now analyze to see the average daily, maybe the average, for instance, you want to distribute salaries. And you're trying to get the hourly payment, how much you pay each worker per hour. Are you going to run it for 4 days? Or you're running it for 6 days? And how are you going to calculate what do you consider to be a month? They may say the salary is paid at the end of the month, but they still have to calculate maybe right down to days, to weeks, to hours, to know. So that when an employee spends 1 hour outside of a due break, you know how much to deduct. So how do you get at that? So data cleaning is very, very important. Making the data ready for analysis. It plays a key role. It takes a lot of time because there could be a lot of issues with your data. And we'll discuss the issues. Is it about missing data? Is it about outliers? Is it about duplicates? Is it about inconsistency? Somebody writes France CFA with France FRS. Another one writes FC this and that. They're referring to the same thing. But in data analysis, they're not the same thing. They will give you wrong results if you don't take care. A company has branches in China, in America, in Cameroon, and you are a data analyst, and they'll say you should analyze their sales data. Pull data from the US comes in dollar. Pull from China, it comes in I think Chinese yuan. How do they call it? Yen or something like that. Or once China uses, forgotten the name of the currency. Or Naira. We pull Naira in France CFA. These are different currencies. You wouldn't be analyzing your data. Part is in France CFA, another one is in Naira, another one is in dollar. You have to synchronize it to one currency. Either you're taking France CFA, taking Naira, or you're taking dollar. If you go ahead and analyze the data in the different currencies, your results are ultimately wrong. You'll be very wrong. You may say Cameroon is doing well because you have large figures. But the truth is that Cameroon is not doing well. It's just because the dollar is highly valued in terms of currency than France CFA. So their figures may seem small. You know, somebody who has maybe $1 million dollar could be in trillions of millions in France CFA. In so many millions in France CFA. But in dollar, it's just 1 million. So that is very, very important. Data cleaning. We'll see that. Like we said, we are looking at concepts and theories because they are vital for us to make our decisions to be able to get the right resource. Any question? Any question? Any question? Unmute yourself and ask, please. See, I'm alone. There's no question.
All right, sir, please. I have one or two
Yes.
clarifications.
Okay.
All right, let's say you have been consulted as a data analyst for a particular business. Does it mean the business is permitted to? Does it mean unless the business faces a particular problem before they will need your service, or you are an employee of that particular business and you identify that problem to solve?
They must first be, whether you are employee or you are this and that. When we say solving a problem, you don't look at a problem in the data analysis well as necessary the problem. It's not exactly the same as what we consider as problem on daily basis in a business. You get it? Yes. Take for instance, please use your real name. Say somebody will take notes. This is we need to know who is there. Please use your real name. We have Randy, we have Price, we have Neville. So the person will take note. Let me know who is there. Now what happens is that a problem is not necessarily a problem like you first I got up today and there was no water for me to drink. You get it? That's not the idea. Now let's assume that you are working for a bank or a microfinance and they have been doing loans. Normally, the organization might not experience the fact, they may not first feel that their current loan application process is not good. But you're a data scientist, you say, okay, you go and meet the loan officer and ask for all the loan data for the past 3 years. Now you come and sit on the loan data, you're analyzing the loan data, looking for what patterns. You want to see how the loan process works. We may say that, okay, one of the issues you want to resolve is that you want to see how long it takes to give out a loan application and if that time can be reduced. So you're trying to determine how long from the time the person applied to when the loan was granted. So that becomes a problem of interest, right? Because you want to shorten the period. So you have an objective. You may say, okay, one of the things I want to do is to see what is our default rate and who are those who are likely to default. So that becomes a problem. So you go into the data, you calculate, you peel. For the past 3 years, loan has been given. We have given around maybe 1,000 loans. And amongst the 1,000, we have received fully paid back and on time 400, 200 paid, but they were paid after a lot of follow-up, a lot of calls, and then we have again, we have 300 just giving that have not paid, and the same as they will come delinquent. That's what data says. The second level of questions you ask is, well, if these people, you want to dig deeper. What are the profiles of those who pay their loans on time? What are their profiles? Do you guys see my screen? Or you don't see? Do you see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. What are the profiles of those who pay their loans on time? You study. What are the profiles of those who don't pay on time? You study. Now you may study and identify that those who pay their loans on time are people who are employed maybe with the government and earn a salary of at least 300,000. And those who pay their loan, who struggle, they earn from 200 to 300. Those who don't pay are those who you are now identifying issues to come and improve the loan process. You may want to build an algorithm to be able to predict who is likely to pay back the loan and not pay back. So you discover that just with that loan, which is just one a single department, you have a lot of work to do on daily basis. Now, apart from that, you always have to monitor data to see what is happening so that fraud can be prevented before. So there is a lot that you have to do, even if you are just working as a paid. It's not like they will need to go and experience a problem. No. Your work is constantly looking at data and ways to improve it. What was the performance this week? What was the performance this compared to this week compared to last week? Those are still problems the data analyst will be able to solve or should be able to provide answers to. I hope I've tried to answer your question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So now when you are done with cleaning, you can now go into what we call analysis and exploration. You explore before analysis. This way you come in with plots, maybe histograms, box plot, scatter plot, bar charts, all types of charts to visualize the data and then test hypotheses. You want to analyze, visualize, and test hypotheses. Then you can now build a model. Maybe you want to build a predictive model, or you want to build an algorithm or a classifier, whatever you want to build. And the last important part is presentation of your findings. Now, as a data analyst, your work starts from problem definition to analysis to it ends with reporting. Reporting can be in a form of you write a document that shows what we have found. The reporting can be in a conference setting where you have to present a report. Reporting can be a video, you do a video record of your findings. Reporting can be in so many other forms. You have to report. Or you build a dashboard. A dashboard is an interactive visuals that gives. Now, again, we talked about dashboard being the concept of a dashboard in data science. We say we borrow it from cars. What does a dashboard do in a car? Gives you quick overview. That's where we get to where we say KPIs. KPIs means key performance indicators. Those are things we are tracking. A good business should be able to track key performance indicators so that they will make the right calls on time. That's the last part in the data analysis process. So in sum, as a data analyst, this is what you'll be doing on a daily basis. That is a kind of a quick overview of your task. Problem definition, data collection, data cleaning and analysis, data exploration, data reporting or results reporting and communication. So that's principally how your work is. Now, it's important for you to note as a student that data analysis is a science, but much more, it is an art. You need to be creative. You need to be dynamic. That's why we started by saying that it's not about hardcore numbers. Beyond that, there is some level of creativity that you have to bring to the table. So the most important thing for us here, or common things that you should take note, is that it's not about the mathematics itself. That is the most important part. It's about getting meaning from your data. You must take care of all the tools are using on the assumptions is very, very important. And also, please allow the data to speak and not you. That's very, very important. If you are working for an organization and you know you have done all your data cleaning processes, the data is correct, the assumption, the problem well defined, the data collected, analyzed accordingly. Whatever the findings are, please don't manipulate them. Allow the data to speak. That you don't like, you wanted to see significant hypotheses and they're saying insignificant. Don't force them to be significant. But there is also something to note. Don't trust data blindly. Data may not always tell you the whole story. You need to ask questions even after analyzing. We can go back to the loan officer for the example. Ask questions. Because sometimes data cannot tell you why. You need to go and ask questions. Why? Data may not be able to tell you the context, to give you enough information about context. So you have to go back and ask, when was this data collected? Why was it collected? Who collected it? How was the collection process done? And so on and so forth. What was happening at this particular time? That information is useful. So while we're working and you want to rely on data, don't blindly trust your data because data can still mislead. I always say this, it's easy to lie with that data, but strangely easier to lie with data. If I tell you that 20% of people did this, you are highly likely to believe. So I just say some people believe this. No, that statistics gives you more confidence in what I'm saying compared to when I just present an argument. If you go to a company and say you have been bringing them a huge amount and you show them that for this month I brought in this amount of revenue, then they'll be able to have a better understanding. So that is very, very important. Any other question? Any other question? Madam Pride, ask a question.
My questions will come maybe along the line. I don't have questions for now.
Okay.
But sir, please, will you share with us your notes?
Yes. And even we are recording
Thank
the class, so there will be record.
Okay.
Okay. Let's match fire. Now, we have already gone through this process, but just again, we want to talk about the research process so that you have an understanding how it works, especially as quantitative data is concerned, because in our study, we'll focus significantly on quantitative data. But now the research process, basically, as we say, starts from problem definition. For those who have done research methodology in school, you know that you basically have to define your problem. That's often done in chapter 1. Chapter 2 talks about literature review. The essence of literature review is for you to see and have an understanding. The literature review answers maybe three questions. What are you doing? That's where you define terms, concepts. It help you to define concepts and say that maybe want to look at performance. This is how Mr. A defined performance. This is how Mr. B defined performance. This is how Mr. C defined performance. And I'll be defining it following its definition or a blend of the three. We are trying to establish concepts. The next thing is that do we have any theoretical philosophies, concepts, or principles that guides the behavior? That's why we bring in theories. Theories are abstract ideas that tries to explain human behavior in real world, especially as social scientists are concerned. We have the theory of motivation as an example. The theory of motivation says that the motivation, let's take the case of the hierarchical theory of needs according to Abraham Maslow. To Maslow, he said that people are motivated or people get motivated depending on their levels or their social standing. And that for you to rightly motivate people, you need to know where they are so you can bring in the right motivation. I'm just trying to give you a quick overview of it. If somebody needs a mansion and you dash a person, maybe you give the person 10,000, that 10,000 or 100,000 or maybe 1 million, the person might not find that as anything worthy because the person needs a better house, a big house, and you're giving money. If somebody needs, let's say, somebody needs food, which is the basic level. At the basic level, people need food, they need shelter, accommodation. After that, they may need family relations and going up the hierarchy of ladder to the highest place where you say self-esteem, self-fulfillment, where you know that you have made it, you are excited. Those are different levels. Now, in our study and work as data scientists, you try to also model some of these ideologies. Your data, you are not working in space, you are working within a context, and that context is defined by already existing principles, either in terms of theories or empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is something like practical. Empirical seems to be closer to the word practical. Something you can see, feel. If somebody conducts a study, then you can see that the person actually conducted a study because I can go and meet the questionnaire, see the report and things like that. It's different from a theory. Somebody establish a theory, you'll not be able to feel, you understand the ideology, but you cannot see it, you cannot feel it, but it's still all useful. So you have the empirical part of our discussion. Now, when we have studied, understand which is the aspect of literature, we go into methodology. Methodology. Methodology talks about how do you go about getting the data, or even before we talk about getting data, which design are you using? There are different research design. Research design is like a blueprint of how you conduct your study. For instance, are you going to use questionnaires? Are you going to use interviews? Are you going to use focus group? Will it be a survey study or be a retrospective study? For instance, you can conduct a study and you never leave your office. You go online, you pull articles from other studies and come and analyze. That's still a study. You can send people to the field. You can do interviews on phone. You can watch TV and still, that's the data that you're collecting. So you have to decide which study to take. Once you have decided a study design, you need to decide the population. Population says that Elements of interest. I think that's one of the concepts that we'll discuss as we are progressing. Population. And the idea here is this, that please give me a second. Yes. Okay, sorry, please. So I was explaining What happens at the methodologies level? You need to define population. Understand what is population. Population refers to the total elements of interest in a study. In other words, it refers to all those who are eligible to provide answers to your questions. And so, from population, we have what we call sample. Sample is a subset. Some of these concepts we already know them. Sample is a subset of entire population. So now, from the sample, whenever you're analyzing your data, the data you're analyzing comes from a sample. It's a subset. If you're analyzing the data, it comes from the entire population, we'll call it census. That's why when the government comes out, they want to conduct a census. It means they want to go around, collect data from every member of the society. The last census was conducted in Cameroon, and I think it was in. Somebody cannot see my screen. My screen is still where it was. I've not changed. I'm still on the same screen. Do you see now? Do you see my screen now? Somebody say he or she was not seeing my screen. I'm asking, do you see my screen now? Okay. So they are what this gives you now. It gives you the possibility now to do what? We've said okay. When you identify a sample, you collect the data, you analyze the data, you are always generalizing with respect to the population. Your sample is not important. Nobody collects and analyzes data for the sake of the sample. They went to the market and met 100 women and collected their market prices. That is good, but it's not that important, or it's not that important. What is important about the sample is that you can study their behavior and see if that is a reflection of the entire market women in the community or in the market that you're trying to analyze and know how their buying preferences or whatsoever. So that is where sample comes in. Now, there are different types of sampling. We have what we call quantitative sampling, probability sampling and non-probability sampling. With probability sampling, it gives participation of participants is on a probability basis. But for non-probability sampling, it's not on probability basis, which means the researcher, the data analyst, or whoever is doing the work decides who participates in the study. Can be using some kind of conditions. For instance, I'm looking for those who have experience. If you are dealing with a knowledge-based study, you will look for people that have the knowledge, right? You will not go and look for. If you want to use a questionnaire, then it is ideal for you to use people who can rate. So you decide your sample based on a certain condition. If I'm looking for ambers, so it cannot be probability. It will be what? Non-probability, because I'm looking for people who maybe ambers. So I would say I'm looking for somebody who has held a gun. You identify them, not using a probability, but what? Maybe using what we call a referral method or recommendation approach, or snowball. That's a good right name, snowball approach. Or we can use purposive. Purposive says you are using a particular purpose or objective to be able to select who participate in the study. Now, these are concepts that we need to bring them. That's why I'm bringing you these concepts. As we are getting these concepts, they are virtuals that you need for your work as a data scientist. You may be asking, we have already done these things in school. Why are we bringing them back here? No, they are useful. And you will understand with time. There's a lot for us to cover, right? Yes, there's a lot for us to cover. So let your brain should be ready. But it will be simple. Some places will be difficult. You have to learn some hard things, some new things. Now, everyone we are saying still maybe relatively simple and straightforward. But at some moments, you have to learn some little hard things, but not many. So, for us, we will be focusing more on quantitative analysis. And with quantitative analysis, the objective is that we are dealing mostly with numbers. We want to collect data from a large sample so that we can analyze and make inference to the population. Why do we choose quantitative techniques? One, objectivity. We don't want personal judgments to interfere with the results. We want objectivity. Numbers reduce the role of personal interpretation. Replicability. You should be able to reproduce the same, to get the same results over and over. That's why we can take the results and apply, because we know that if it happens to branch Boya branch and Kumba branch is a replica of Boya branch, then we can take the results from Boya branch to Kumba branch and still have the same results. That's replicability. Generalization. We can generalize that what we have seen with Boya branch can happen with the rest of the branches, because the rest of the branches are a replica of Boya branch. Let's say the case of microfinance institution. It means you don't necessarily have to go and take data from Kumba, this and that. The data from one branch can be analyzed and the results are applied to the rest of the branches if they share the same population with the same attributes. That's the essence of quantitative techniques. So we want to rely heavily on that. Precision. We are able to say with certainty and with certain confidence level what effect. We can quantify our risks. We can quantify our effects. We can say that if we do this, sales will increase by 5% or between 5 to 10%. But that is not the case with what? Qualitative analysis. Then the most important part is that we can build models that will help us to be able to observe things and make forecasts. We can build models with a certain level of confidence to forecast the future. You see somebody working on CRTV says we are forecasting that will rain today 3 p.m. in Buya. They're using data. And if the data was right and everything falls in part, by 3 p.m., there'll be rain in Buya. Because it gives us that possibility, give us the power to be able to make that generalization. Again, you have a question, you unmute yourself and ask. Now, the quantitative research design is already what we have discussed, which says problem identification, literature review, formulate of hypothesis. We'll discuss hypothesis. What's hypothesis? Hypothesis sometimes is basically defined as an educated guess about a research problem or a tentative answer to a research question you have asked. Before you embark on analyzing your data, you must have an answer. You must have an expectation. I know that the performance between men and women will be the same. That is an answer to the question, is there any difference between the performance of men and women? Or do we have any difference between how men and women perform in athletes? So we go with the null hypothesis. The null hypothesis basically says there's no effect or there's no difference. There's no relationship. There's no relationship between rainfall and the growth of plants. Then that's the null. The alternative says no, rainfall has an effect. Now, when we have hypotheses, we say there's a null hypothesis, the alternative hypothesis, because at the end of the day, we collect our data to prove whether the null is true or false within a certain confidence interval. Now we have different types of hypotheses. We can talk, we talk about the two-tail and the one-tail test, which tries to say we can decide whether it's an increase or a decrease or just a change. We'll discuss some of those things as we make progress. But what is important for us here is that in your data analysis process, you need to formulate hypotheses. Hypotheses are tentative answers to your research questions, so to say. If you don't have hypothesis or expectation, then you never really know whether you are right or wrong, right? If you did not plan that your sales to be 100,000, whether you sell 50,000, you'll be comfortable. If you have planned sales to be 100,000, you end up, if the data analyst told you that you sell 100,000, you end up selling 50,000, you can say the data analysis was wrong or right. But if you did not have any specific plan, then you will not be able. That's the concept of hypothesis. We've talked about selecting a design and then choosing a sample, collecting data, preparing and analyzing and reporting your results. That's a standard process. In terms of research design, we can have experimental designs. We have quasi-experimental, we have surveys and cross-sectional. Some of these concepts, you can look them up, but they're very, very important. Somebody who goes in a hospital, they want to implement a new drug, they can do what we call experimental design. They give drugs, the right drug to patients, and to some they don't give it, and see how many people will get well by taking the drug and how many will not get well by not taking the drug. They calculate and see whether there's any significant difference between the two groups. That's experimental. Or somewhere quasi-experimental, when we cannot do true manipulation. For instance, we cannot, let's take the case, we cannot extract blood. We can just try to bring in a semi-experiment, maybe like teaching people one thing and the other one, we're not teaching them. That is unlike pure science experiments where there is true manipulation. There's true manipulation. Surveys are use of questionnaires, interviews, this focus group discussions, and the rest. That's the use of surveys. And it's quite popular in social sciences. Then there's what we call cross-sectional. Cross-sectional means you collect data at a single point in time. That is as opposed to longitudinal. Longitudinal says you repeat it over time, maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 years. You say for the last 30 years. So they're using a period. Then we have correlational studies. They're trying to manipulate one variable and see how it affects another. Those are some common designs. It's important you know. Now, your work as a data analysis or analyst needs to be, you need to be grounded in a lot of knowledge. Remember, this is not only a science, it's also a matter of creativity. You need to be creative. Then conceptual and operationalization. How do you define your terms? We talk about concepts. You need to define your terms. And so you must define your terms so that we know. You say you're measuring sales based on the number of what we know that's what you are using, so that we don't judge you on something else. So you must define your terms accordingly. That's where you go to literature to see how others are defining. And you can either formulate your own definition or you rely on existing definition. But what is important is that you have to define your terms and make them explicit so that people know what you're talking about. Are we together? We have already talked about uh, we have already talked about this. How do we call it? Hypothesis formulation, the null and the alternative. So, any question? Are we tired? Is somebody tired? Sorry for that. So, that is what I think we'll cover for today. Let's not overlabor your brain. Theory sometimes can come out too much, right? In our next class, we'll be talking about data types, measurement, and data structures. We'll see that. And we'll talk about data collection. We've already talked about sampling. Some of these concepts, we've already seen them. And the next class will be on Saturday, right? On Saturday, you should come along with if you are whether online or on site, people continue with database. On Sunday, if you have not installed Power BI, I mean Anaconda, you should do, because on Sunday we'll start also with programming. We'll start programming. So we'll be discussing variable. While we're discussing these concepts, we are doing the practical along, so that my desire is that if you can go faster, it will be good. I also have a lot of pre-recorded content. If you saw one, I can share so that we go faster. We can even catch up with the other group, with our cohort, so we move along. And I think that will be better. So it all depends on you guys. You have the latitude to decide. Since we are not many, we are just about, I don't know whether we're 3 of us or 4 of us. I mean, maybe some people will still join otherwise. But like I said in the start of the class, how fast we can go depends on you guys. There's a lot of content already that you can go through. If you're comfortable, we just come to class instead of spending too much time. We do the practicals. So any question, any worry, any contribution, we're open for that. And if you have a friend who might be interested in the training, please do recommend us. We'll appreciate. Yes, our class is now up to 2 hours. We started at 10. We have about 20 minutes. I just feel that maybe you are tired, because I've been doing a lot of talking. It'd be much easier if we are doing some practice. So that's why I felt that instead of starting something new now, or you guys want us to continue? If you want us to continue, we can continue. I don't have a problem. This is subheading, a new subheading. It's about data types. Okay. You say we should continue, we must finish our time. The brain is still. Do we all agree? Okay. Don't have an issue. Let's continue. Now, we're talking about data. One thing that you need to take good note is this variables. So you might not have this on this outline, but I want you to take it down first if you have been jotting. Variables. Variables. What is a variable? A variable is defined as anything in your study that has the potential to take on different values. That's the definition of a variable. In programming, a variable is defined as placeholders. We'll discuss that when we get back to it. But in data, in general, a variable is defined as things that have tendency to pick on different values. For instance, when we say gender, you think of male and female. Except if you're from the US, you start thinking of LGBTQ and etc. But whenever you hear gender, you're thinking of male or female. Why? Because when gender can either be male or female. But if I say female, you don't think of it in terms of categories. You see something like a constant. So that is a variable. When we say income, you cannot place your head on a particular figure. Think of a range of figures. Maybe you are thinking of your own income. Another person think of his or her own income. Another person think of his or her own income, and so on and so forth. So we have that variation. That is a variable. In data analysis and data science, we group our variables, maybe principal into two categories first. Independent variable, IDV, and dependent variable, DV. Now, what is independent variable? The independent variable is always considered as the variable we manipulate. It's like the input variable. We can increase the amount of water or watering of a crop and see how the plant will produce. So watering becomes independent. Like the word independent, when you say somebody's independent, it means the person is free and doesn't really rely on another. Dependent means you are relying on another. So those concepts are used in English language. That's the same way that is used in statistics, somehow closer to that. Now, why are we looking at variables? The work of a data analyst or a data scientist surrounds just around manipulation of variables to see outcomes. If we go to a company and we decide to manipulate our performance, we say, okay, Tuesday, we have only male workers. Wednesday, only female workers. Thursday, male and female. We're manipulating gender to see how performance will be. We cannot compare the days. Where do we have the highest performance? Is it on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays? If it is on Thursdays, it means that when we have men and women working together, performance is high. So on Tuesdays, it means that men perform far better than women, and maybe a combination of men and women. That's manipulation of the independent variable to see how it affects the dependent variable, which is performance. Now, out of dependent and independent variable, we have another set of variable called extraneous variable or control variable or intervening variables. These are other variables that can come into play. And what are they? These are variables that affect your dependent variable as well, that you are not manipulating in your study. For instance, we did say let's change men, women, and combination of men and women. But we did not talk about age. But age could be something that affects performance, although we're manipulating only gender. So age become what? An extraneous variable, a control variable we need to cater for. We need to ensure that age should be neutral. Age should not be a factor. And so that is the idea behind variables. Now we have different types of variables. If you want to go deeper, which we might not really talk about them now, like observed variable, unobserved variable, latent variable, exogenous variable, endogenous variable. Now, those are some kind of advanced statistics, especially in social science research. We are using smart PLS to run structural equation modeling. But what is important for us at this particular point is to know that we have dependent and independent variable. We manipulate the independent variable. So anytime you sit down to analyze your data, you need to know which variable is your dependent variable and which ones are independent variable. And the dependent variable is always the source of the problem. I want to put the source of the problem is where you think that the problem is, and you are bringing independent variable as solutions to the issues that you are facing with the dependent variables. Take the case of cells. If cells are underperforming, that is where the problem is. So we now bring in what? Maybe increase expenditure on advert, train our staff, sales staffs, and buy new gadgets for marketing and so on and so forth. That's manipulation. Those things that we're doing, increasing staffs, training, expenditure, and these are independent variables we're manipulating. So think of a problem as what is happening with a dependent variable, if I may put it that way. Now, we have moderating variables, we have mediating variables. If you change gender and performance changes, then that's a moderator. If we have a mediator, it's like the concept of mediation. There is somebody working in between to have the effect. So that's also very vital for you to have an understanding on that. I'm bringing that because you may not have it as part of your notes. And so we need to understand that because it plays a key role. Now, having said that, data types. Now, variables now are measured in terms of what we call data types. Variables come in different types called data types. And data types and their measurements and structures are very, very important because they influence how your decisions will be made, how your analysis will be conducted. It will tell you how you should conduct your analysis. If a variable is categorical, you analyze it using some analytical tools. You'll be able to test hypotheses using some particular techniques. You'll be able to plot using some particular charts, and so on and so forth. So that is very, very important for you to have an understanding on that. So a large form of the analysis students do will have mistakes because they never take into account the different variable measurement types and the other. Now, we have data classified in terms of quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative and qualitative. When we take quantitative data, what do we mean? When we say qualitative data, what do we mean? Quantitative data, most often, we are measuring hardcore numbers. It's not like text. It's not like literature, videos that you're watching or interviews that you're, no, maybe it could be talking about we are able to calculate, add, subtract, and the rest. That will be best classified as quantitative data. Now, quantitative data can be described as discrete. It can be described as continuous. it can be described as categorical in terms of whether a data is quantitative. It can be described as discrete. Discrete data means it's countable, whole numbers, 5 years, 10 years, 5,000, 7,000, maybe 20% or so. But if we say 5.2, then that is a continuous variable, such as income, time, and the rest. There is always that scale measurement of that variable. We have subcategory. It can be divided into little categories. Then we have categorical data. Categorical data. Categorical data now classify our data into categories or into groups, into segments. So it doesn't form part of the numeric data that we're seeing. And most often with categorical data, we have what we call finite categories. Gender can be classified only male and female. Gender is male and female, and that's all. But age can have uncountable different categories, different values. Colors, primary colors, there are 3. So that's category. Product categories, regions, and all of that will be categorical data. Now, why is this important? The different categories, data that is categorical will be analyzed using some certain tools. And that is very, very important because you will not be adding gender. You cannot add male and female. You cannot be add this and that. If you add male and female, maybe I have a value of 1.2 as the average for male and female. It doesn't make sense because it's a categorical variable. So you're already getting an ideology into how categorical or how the data classification may affect your analysis. So in terms of quantitative or qualitative, our data can be described as discrete, continuous, or categorical. And in terms of measurement levels or measurement scale, we have 4 levels of measurement, 4 measurement scales. Of what we call the nominal data. Nominal data principle is referring to categorical data only. Our data is classified in terms of categories. We've seen an example of blood group, maybe what region somebody belongs to, maybe your gender, your preferred colors. That's categorical. And most often, the kind of analysis we'll do here will be frequencies, the use of mode, use of chi-square, and things like that, which we'll see. Then we have ordinal data. Now, while nominal data is arranged, we arrange our data in terms of what categories. Now, within this category, there's no hierarchy. You say gender, men doesn't in any way signify higher order than women, right? Or female or male. And so there's no hierarchy, there's no equal distance between. These are just classification of this. Then we have ordinal data. Ordinal data, now while the nominal data may not have an order or a hierarchy, we cannot take from the lowest to the highest. Ordinal data has an order. You can say this is a first, second, third position. But one thing with ordinal data is that we don't have what we call equal distance. You don't know what distance actually exists between somebody who takes the first position and somebody who takes the 10th position. We cannot measure that out in terms of quantities or quantifying it. For instance, when we see another, to contrast that with data that will have equal distance, somebody who scores 10, another person scores 20, the person with 20 is 2 times more than the person with 10. But somebody who takes first position and somebody who takes fourth position, it doesn't necessarily mean that the person at fourth position is 4 times less than the person who takes first. So that's the concept of that equal distance cannot be measured out. For ordinary data, most often we are dealing with examples like linked items. And we said, to what extent do you agree? Level of satisfaction, level of happiness, level of, and so on. And most of the statistics we'll do here will be median analysis, percentiles, maybe rank tests, which we'll see them. And so those are some of the statistical techniques that we'll use. Then we have interval data. With interval data, the concept here is that we can have equal interval, we can measure it out, but there's what we call no true zero value. No true zero value. The concept of no true zero value is that zero here doesn't mean the absence of that element. Your temperature can be negative. It will still be useful. But your age cannot be zero. Right? If age is zero, it means that thing doesn't exist. It signifies the non-existence of that particular thing. If distance is zero, it means no distance. If income is zero, it means no income. But if temperature is zero, it means what? There's still temperature, because I can even go to negative, right? Yes. So here, the statistics we can do mean, we can do standard deviation, Pearson, rank, correlation, t-test, and many others. Then we have ratio, which is ratio. We have true zero, which means zero means zero. Now, it's important to note that in practice, interval and ratio most often are treated the same. There's no major difference. That's why if we are using the software like SPSS, they classify their data into three categories: nominal, ordinal, and scale. So they will combine these two and give a name as scale data. Scale data. Python will classify its own as integer, string, which we will see. Then integer and float. They are referring almost to the same concept, but the differences is just the appellation. It respects almost the same principles. But in data science, when we talk about measurement levels, we have these 4 measurement levels. Now, the next thing is structured and unstructured data. Structured data means your data is arranged in the form of rows and columns. That's where Excel comes in. That's where SPSS comes in. That's where SQL, Structured Query Language, comes in. SQL. SQL stands for Structured Query Language, comes in. Your data is arranged in the form of rows and columns. Most often, the rows represent observations, cases, participants, or while your columns represent variables: age, gender, income, salaries, and what are you measuring? Sales, discounts, profits, quantity, that constitute columns most often. Unstructured data has no predefined format. Can be text. This conversation we are recording can be transcribed to give us text, can be social media posts, can be web pages, review, can be audio, images, and all. With modern analytical tools, we can analyze all sorts of data. Then another classification of data is in terms of time. Cross-sectional data means you collect the data at one point in time, most often with questionnaires, interviews, focus groups. That's cross-sectional data. We have Time series is over a period, maybe over a month, monthly, annually, and the rest. And then we have panels, longitudinal data. We have same over a period, but dealing with maybe annually in most cases. And finally, we can classify our data into primary versus secondary. Primary data is collected first time by the person who wants to use it. If you go to the hospital and you go and retrieve data that was collected by nurses, you are collecting your secondary data. You are not the person who collected the data. If you take the questionnaire and go to the field and ask students what this and that, that's primary data. You're collecting it yourself for your use. Primary data most often is collected by the researcher or the data analyst. Secondary data is collected by another person. You take it and use it for. We can get secondary data from organizations like Institute of National Statistics, World Bank, there are so many data sets, online repository that you can go there and get your data. Maybe Google Data. There are so many platforms, data.gov, and there's a lot of data. There's a lot of data online. So that is where you get secondary data. Primary data can be collected. I'll talk about data collection tools. Subsequently, you will understand that you can collect data using different tools. So I think we can end here for today. Any question? Any worry? Any worry? Okay, if there's no worry, I think we'll continue our classes on Saturday, 4 p.m. Right? So see you in class Saturday, 4 p.m. Madam, are we together?
Yes, sir, we are.
If you go to the hospital and collect data, that's primary, secondary data. You're not the one who collected, you are taking existing data. Yes, data installation was done in the previous class and you're not there, Ranzi. So if you want to install Power BI, just go on Google and type Power BI and you see the download button. If you download it, I think just double click on it and follow the process. The one that may need light has gone off. So internet is off from here.